good evening to our listening audience. My name is Tracey Gordon. I am the Register of Wills here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And today I have all of Philadelphia delegation of congressional elected officials. Starting on my left, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, Congressman Brandon Boyle, and a dear friend that I've known for years, Congressman Dwight Evans. And so we're going to get right to the questions. Our guests, they had a long day voting in the House, and I don't want to keep them long, but this is a very, very, very important subject. Let's just get to it. We got a Tangled title problem here in Philadelphia, PA. Recently, the PHLROW Trust conducted a study that I requested for them to identify where these Tangled titles were sitting in Philadelphia. They identified 10,000 Tangled titles and their locations. For those who are new and learning about a Tangled titles is basically when someone has a legal interest in a property, but the property is still in a dead person's name, such as, you think you inherited your mother's property just because you are her child, and your mother dies and the house is still in her name, and you think it's an automatic transfer. And there's not an automatic transfer in the state of Pennsylvania. There are processes and procedures that you need to conduct in order to have that property transferred, and that process is called probate, and that's what my office does. Many people think that they transfer the title in my office. No, that is a whole totally different organization, a whole department ran by a Commissioner Jim Leonard. And right now, with this crisis, including the homelessness crisis that we have, we need to come up with some quick solutions. And by me asking them and requesting them to show us where these Tangled titles are, is to me not only proof that they exist, but the fact that we know where these houses are, so we can get the necessary information out to these constituents so we can help them become the legal owner of these properties, so they can conduct business with the properties, business such as the ability to obtain homeowners insurance, which everyone needs. We live in row houses. The ability to sell the property if you want, the ability to transfer their house to your children, or even the ability to have access to FEMA, and that's government services that come down when there are catastrophes, such as the last catastrophe that we had with this last hurricane. We're in a crisis because many people still don't know the importance of making a will. People not only don't know that our office existed, but they don't know the importance of making a will. So in an event they die, or when they die, the person that you leave as your executor, or the person that you want to inherit your property or your things or your assets, or the people that you want to protect your family if they're minors or disabled, will have a clear path and not have to be at a funeral wondering what next. The what next need to be planned, prepared, so you can protect your generational wealth. And in Philadelphia County, we have not been doing it, and it's unique to our state. In the other 66 counties, they know the process. Somewhere along the line, we missed that process. And so tonight, I want to talk to you all about what you all have been doing as it results or relates to Tangled titles, but also how we can partner with you all to maybe, I know we have the attention of the country because it's a homeless problem all over. First time homeless problem all over. But we need solutions, and we need solutions immediately. So, well, first of all, let's ask Congressman Dwight Evans to, explain to us what the housing is essential program or act that he's proposing to the Congress.
First thing, I want to thank you, Tracey. And I want to thank you for the leadership that you have shown with my colleagues, Mary Gay Scanlon and Brendan Boyle, collectively. This is a first. So I give you credit for showing that leadership and that you bring the federal elected officials together with this. All of us sit in very key positions. That's the first thing you need to understand. And Brendan, in our case, we sit on the Ways and Means Committee. I will talk about this in the context of, and Mary Gay Scanlon sits on the Judiciary Committee and the Rules Committee. All those things are interconnected. Housing is Essential is a plan that I came up with. And basically, it states just what it is. Housing is essential. It's a program which is on my website that I've laid out in terms of how we address housing. It is connected, matter of fact, in the Building Back Better plan. And for specific examples, for example, with Brendan and I sitting on the Ways and Means Committee, which deals with tax credits to develop and preserve affordable housing, which is very essential. When that bill passed the House, it is now in the Senate. So basically, it would help Philadelphia like it would help other areas. The second thing is regulatory changes. Strength and Fair Housing writes that the HUD secretary, she's been to Philadelphia twice. Matter of fact, she may get an apartment and move to Philadelphia. Marsha Fudge, which we all know, has demonstrated that Philadelphia is important. And last but not least is federal housing programs. There is an initiative worked on that there is a potential $150 billion, $150 billion that will be available across the nation, which is in the United States Senate. So for the first time, with the collective effort of each of us together in our own different roles, join up with you in the role you serve, we need to raise the awareness. The awareness is what we need, like you've been doing. You've been using social media very effectively. Plan, preserve, and protect. Plan, preserve, and protect. So I share with you, with this expertise coming together, the housing is essential is an aspect that I started out with, and I yield back to you, Tracey.
Throw up the map so we can show the listening audience and our Congress people where these tangled titles are and how it affects their direct congressional district, please. Okay, so that's the entire map of Philly. Congressman Brandon Boyle, you'll see where your area is in red. Dwight, you can see your area. In the dark areas is where they're most, where the tangled titles are mostly like. But they're all, even though they may not be as bad as in Congressman Dwight area, there are pockets in both of your areas that are lit up with tangled titles.
Especially since I have to hop off and at 6:30 and to make my train. We're fortunate that we have a wonderful president and first lady. First Lady Jill Biden will be in Philadelphia tomorrow morning. And so racing back to get home so we can greet her tomorrow. But I would be remiss if I had to leave before I just applaud you, Tracey, for your leadership. Dwight hit the nail on the head with all of his comments, including applauding you for your leadership of bringing us together and talking about this issue. Early on, before this started, my other colleague who represents Philadelphia and does a wonderful job, Mary Gay Scanlon, hit the nail on the head when she talked about the fact that it is challenging to address this at the federal level because this is such a state-specific issue. And the reality is, unfortunately, Pennsylvania at the state level does not do a good job with its law in this area. It does not provide the sort of protection for people who are victims of what is one of the worst theft crimes that we can imagine. So at the federal level, there are, though, a few tools we have. Dwight mentioned a few of them. First, I can tell you that, and you can see on the map where I represent
Mhm.
basically the eastern half of North Philadelphia and all of Northeast Philadelphia. If someone comes into one of my district offices, whether it's Broad and Girard or on Bustleton Avenue in the Northeast, we immediately will reach out to the Register of Wills office to work with them. We'll connect people with community legal services, with Philadelphia Legal Assistance, with Senior Law Center. What we recently did was dramatically increase funding available for some of those programs at the federal level. That's some of that, by the way, is in the Build Back Better Act, which we're currently working on right now. Dwight, Mary Gay, and I all voted in favor of it a couple Fridays ago, and it passed the House. It is, as we speak, sitting in the Senate, and we're hoping, indeed urging them to take action and pass this by Christmas, so that way it can be signed into law. So those are some of the things. I would also point out that, and this isn't just about the Tangled deed issue, but more broadly, the Fair Housing Act is one of the most important federal laws to come into existence over the last 6 decades. But it is only as effective to the degree that it is enforced. And that is an area where I believe, frankly, we have to do a better job. How many people have been left out economically because they were victims of housing discrimination? And that is probably, when it comes to housing, the area where the federal government has kind of the strongest tool at its disposal, but I think it needs to do a much better job.
Congressman Boyle, over the next couple decades, we will see a massive transfer of wealth from the baby boomers to the millennials and Generational X, somewhere near $68 trillion. As a Generational Xer yourself, what are your thoughts on preparing constituents for the transfer of wealth? Because in Philadelphia, people just don't think it's important to make a will. They don't plan for it. And we need to get this information out to them, because the baby boomers are dying without wills here in Philly.
So you're right to ask. First, you're right to ask about this question. It's not an easy challenge. So let me offer a couple thoughts. But before I do, you got it correct, Tracy. I'm in fact a Gen Xer. I'm not a millennial. I sometimes get looped into that, but I am indeed too old to be considered a
Millennial.
so I appreciate that that you got that correct. No, so look, the generational wealth issue actually is linked to the housing issue, and here's what I mean. For most families, the vast majority, the way they build wealth in our country is through home ownership, right? So take, for example, my grandparents and parents. Their dream was to be homeowners. For my grandparents, it was buying a house on Nedrow Street in Olney, represented by Dwight Evans, by the way, and voting for him every 2 years. And then for my parents, it was also buying a row home on Champlain Avenue in Olney, where they lived for over 40 years, and also voting for Dwight Evans every couple. He got a lot of votes from my family, by the way. So now, unfortunately, my grandparents have passed on, and my mother has passed on. For my grandparents, when they passed on, the money, the equity in that house, they 100% own it. They were not rich. It wasn't a lot of money. It was $45,000. But guess what? They started off with zero. And then they were able to pass that on to my mother, and then she passed away, and now it's with my father, but he will pass it on to me and to my sibling. And that's the way, for most ordinary Americans, wealth grows intergenerationally. So this is why the housing piece is so important, because if you have generations of people who are locked out of home ownership, either because of outright discrimination or the denial of economic opportunity, or they're given a subprime loan with an interest rate of 12% when they actually had the credit score to qualify for a good interest rate. You can see how that discrimination and poor treatment of one individual has this generational effect, because it grows and it grows over time. So when we talk about the need for greater equity in this country, what we're attempting to address is generations of the generational effect and compounding interest of folks who didn't get their fair share, and now it impacts those who are alive today. So anyway, so those are, you know, some of my thoughts on this incredibly important matter. But it shows you that when it comes to building wealth in this country, when it shows to building a real middle class that's fair for everybody, that home ownership piece is so critical to it.
They own the homes, or they think they own the homes.
Right.
And because of the lack of understanding the fact that they don't understand how to transfer it. And so we're stuck, and we have to come up with a quick solution about the 10,000 tangled titles. And Philadelphia has the largest home ownership rate for Black and Latino families. And right now with these 10,000, and we definitely have more, that's $1.1 billion of dead capital sitting in Philadelphia. And if we are ever serious about wanting to stop saying we're the 7th largest poor city, you know, I mean, I've been hearing that ever since I've been involved in politics. It never is like a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I see it here. If we can do something about this tangled title. One of the problems that we have is the funding, mainly the untangle the title. We have to use, we look for volunteer attorneys. And this question is for Congresswoman Mary Kay Scanlon. Our effort to combat tangled titles through our PDI program, Probate Deferment Initiative, it helps people to get access to free legal help to help them untangle the title. We waived and deferred the fees, but that's just minimal compared to how much it costs to untangle them. Can you share your thoughts on ways that we can get more attorneys involved? Now, I always say this, attorneys can't volunteer for everything. They still have to live as well. But 10,000 tangled titles, I can't even imagine that we will be able to even get volunteers for all those titles. What can be done besides?
That's a lot of titles to untangle. And you're speaking directly to what I did before I came to Congress. So I worked for a big law firm, and I was on the board of Community Legal Services and Philadelphia Legal Assistance and volunteer lawyers, the VIP project. So that's what we did, was try to leverage as many local resources as possible to help people who couldn't afford lawyers. So just looking at the tangled title problem, and that is one of the most difficult legal issues to deal with for folks who are looking for legal services and can't find it. When someone lives in a house or has some claim to own the house, but their name isn't on the deed, that's what we're talking about with tangled title, right? And often it happens because, say, a parent died and said, oh, I'm going to leave you the house, but then they die and nobody ever does anything to transfer the deed from the parent to the child. And sometimes this can go on for a couple generations and it gets really complicated to straighten it out. So there are ways to prevent that from happening. And the first thing is to make sure people have a will. And when someone dies, to work with the registrar of wills to make sure that that deed is actually transferred. It can also happen when people try to sell a house or they enter into a rent to own kind of agreement. And for whatever reason, the deed never actually gets transferred to the new person's name. So it's really important for people to understand that there's no easy way. If someone's trying to tell you, oh, you can just have this house, that's not going to happen. You need to get actual legal title to the house for a whole bunch of reasons. But so when we were working with folks, usually the issue would come up when they needed help. So they would go to try to settle outstanding taxes and prevent foreclosure, or they'd go to try to negotiate a deal to deal with backlog of utility bills, or to try to get help, government help, to repair a house or LIHEAP to get utilities assistance. And that's when they would find out that they didn't actually legally own the house. So, anything that people can do to prevent from getting in that situation in the first place, make sure there's a will, make sure that the title actually gets transferred. That's really important. It's kind of like brushing your teeth, flossing your teeth. It's not something that's, something you want to dream about, but it's really, really healthy. It's legally healthy to make sure that you get the deed to your house, because it makes everything easier down the road.
Now, I want to ask you this. What additional legislation could be sponsored at the federal level to resolve this tangled title crisis you have in your district and we have in the city?
Right. Well, so state law controls transferring title and it controls wills. So the angles that I've been working on in this realm involve trying to get more support for legal aid, because it really usually does take a lawyer or someone with deep knowledge of the legal system to untangle the title. So trying to get more support for people to get that help they need. The second thing is, as you mentioned, it's not just the cost of a lawyer that prevents people from getting the deed. There's also these filing fees with the courts to do probate or to file the deed. Sometimes even as simple as just having to advertise that you're doing this. So that's where Philadelphia is ahead of the curve in some ways and has set up this Tangled Title Fund, but it does cost some money. And sometimes that's what keeps people from doing what they should do, which is getting the actual deed in their name. So what we're working on is trying to make sure that there is enough legal help through legal aid, through places like the Senior Law Center, to help people make sure that either they have a will and don't get into the tangled title situation in the first place, or if they are in that situation, to help them get out of it. So that's one of the things that my office is looking at, is whether we can provide more funding for the Tangled Title Fund and the other support services that help people untangle the title, so that then they can get that access to government funding to help repair a roof or install a new furnace or something like that, because you usually have to prove that you own the house before you can get that money. And then the other piece is encouraging more lawyers to volunteer and work with the legal aid organizations who really have the expertise to try to spread more. And that's something where I try to use the bully pulpit and say, hey, you really need to do this.
If you're on a tangled title and you're not eligible for FEMA, and that's government emergency grants, right? And our climate is definitely changing. And so we're going to have more hurricanes in the Philadelphia area, because being able to get FEMA assistance to people in tangled titles could make a big difference. And people should not have to worry about paperwork in an emergency.
I know that the concern is they don't want to supply money to people who don't have a right to it, but obviously we're all working on trying to make sure that our housing stock is resilient, as they say, so that we don't have people dealing with homes like in the Eastwick area that are constantly getting flooded. And we want to make sure that people do have access to the resources they need, either first of all, to keep the places from being flooded, or on the flip side, to make sure that they can get access to what they need to fix them up if they do have to deal with extreme weather.
Angela, I wanted to ask you, thank you for joining us, Angela McIver. The long arm of red lining reaches from beyond the grave. We all know that. And we can see the same areas that were redlined have the highest concentration of tangled titles, also had the highest concentration of violence, gun violence. Since this problem has a disparate impact on Black and Latino and Brown families, how can we use the Fair Housing Act to help the people of Philadelphia to get the resources they need to help them fix up their houses, even though the houses are not legally in their names?
Well, first of all, Register Gordon, thank you very much for this invitation. It's an honor to be here. And Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, it's also a pleasure to join you. I had sent you a chat message that I work with your staff and I really enjoy working with them throughout the year. So yeah, the disparate impact of all of this. There's so much to say about it in this short amount of time. I'll try to be as quick as possible. So in mentioning that the state law is what covers the transfer of wills and, transferring titles and wills. That is one thing. But it was also mentioned earlier that it was public policy. And to me, that's where fair housing comes in. If there is public policy related to housing, the definition of disparate impact, meaning it's a neutral policy on its face, seems to be, harmless. Yet when you apply it, it has a disproportionate effect on certain protected classes. My concern right now is that the way that the transfer of titles and wills is unfolding in people's lives, clearly it is having a devastating effect on certain people. So it may be time to revisit, even if it's the state law, the language in this public policy, because public policy is exactly what got us into many of these issues that we're facing. For example, it was public policy based on the Federal Housing Administration to exclude people from gaining access to insurance under the FHA when the redlining maps were legal. So it was through the Federal Fair Housing Act that it became unlawful. So I'm suggesting right now that one of the quick solutions is that we raise to our state legislators, we need them to revisit the language that could very well be contributing to this problem. I wouldn't be surprised at all if, once you examine how we got into this predicament, that somewhere along the way, somebody said, don't allow people in certain areas to receive education outreach or other kinds of information that would have benefited them. I think it's extremely interesting. Why is it that the folks most affected by Tangled titles are the ones who know the least amount about it? Which tells me if you're going to triage services, you want to hone in on those areas where there are the Tangled titles so that we can change people's knowledge and awareness and potential responses to this issue. And linking it to crime and violence, we can't help but do that because of those red line maps by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which excluded people based on areas that they lived in and said, you can only live in this area or you are not able to live in those other areas, which is also tied in some instances to the racial covenants that we're still finding in homes, including in Philadelphia. So, how can the Fair Housing Act be used? It's a novel issue, but I think it's one that we have to raise, maybe through case law, at a minimum, by ensuring that the Division of Housing and Community Development in Philadelphia takes your concerns seriously. I know that they're not getting HUD money to address this issue, but the way that the interim affirmatively furthering fair housing rule is written, I don't see anywhere in here where it says you can't raise issues, because it talks about context and context matters. So if in Philadelphia, Tangled titles is a huge issue that's germane to us, then that's a context-based issue. And I think that office should be listening to your office when it's time for public comments, that your office is contacted so that the folks that you're serving receive surveys so that they can give feedback to that office and perhaps redirect some of those federal funds that's currently being used on certain housing projects to be used in this area to assist you, because clearly this is an issue. Under the assessment of fair housing requirement that Philadelphia has to meet, it can basically look into anything that it wants to. So I'm suggesting that, maybe it's just something that hasn't been on the radar of the Division of Housing and Community Development as a high priority, but with some advocacy, maybe it's something that they will reconsider. And if it's not something that they can directly address, at least work with your office to address this, because it's a housing issue. The Fair Housing Act covers most housing transactions. So this is a housing issue. And it's a housing issue to me that seems to be based on public policy. So let's begin to look at it in that context. And I couldn't agree more with what Congressman Boyle as well as Evans had to say about fair housing and getting to the point of enforcement and education. Most things begin with education because we raise awareness, And once people's awareness has been raised, then they can decide, oh, I think I do, or I don't want to do anything about this, but at least having both avenues available to the public is very important.
And just the safety, with my background in risk management, I just imagine that people are living in houses that they can't insure just in case of a liability. Not to mention, if it's a catastrophic loss, I just got a phone call about people's inability to get the FEMA before it ran out. And I knew for a fact that they wasn't going to be able to get it because they don't legally own the property. But yet and still, they are citizens of the United States. They pay taxes like all the other citizens, but yet the one time they need the assistance for a basic need, housing is a human, this is a human issue. And, I know it's some issues are local, some issues are state, some issues are federal. But to me, housing is an issue that has everything to do with everyone. And the fact that we send so much money in estate and inheritance taxes every year to Harrisburg to the tune of $80 to $100 million per year, I just feel like we need to get the money. First of all, people need to know their entangled titles. I had a tangled title that, and thankfully through my probate deferment initiative program, we have untangled 11 going on 13 titles with no budget and no dedicated staffing. And we just felt, a need to address this because it's going to cost the local, state, and federal more money in the long run when you don't keep families in houses. Because you're saying 10,000 properties. No, this is 10,000 families that potentially are going to be displaced. They're going to lose these houses, whether they lose them just through the fact that they can't maintain them, or even through national catastrophes. And I just want us all, just put a thinking caps on and not have all the answers tonight. Congressman Scanlon, we don't have all the answers tonight, but this is a real big problem in this country, and is affecting adversely Black and Hispanic, Latino, and Brown families.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's been a problem for a long time in Philly, and so we've got to attack it from multiple directions. I mean, one is education, and
Yes,
forums like this are really important to get people to take the steps that they can in advance so they don't end up in this situation. You're absolutely right. We can look at federal programs to provide more resources, and that's the kind of thing we've been doing with the money that we were able to send under the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan to say, okay, here's some money to help prevent evictions, to help prevent mortgage foreclosures, but some of that can go to legal aid to help people figure out what they have to do. Because the biggest problem going into some of this is people just don't know what to do, how to protect themselves. So trying to make sure that we plus that up. Trying to, I think there was a point probably about a decade ago where some of the legal services agencies like Senior Law Center, Philadelphia Legal Assistance got together and issued a challenge to the legal community and said, okay, who can do the most of these cases? Lawyers are inherently competitive. So, maybe we try to get those competitive juices flowing to get some more people working on this, and then seeing what we can do to, dig out of it through plussing up what's going on with the federal housing assistance and 3037. I was looking at it, that does provide some assistance to let people who don't have a title but can show that they have some kind of ownership interest.
That's out of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, as a matter of fact, they're very effective because now the people that were affected by their hurricane can now reapply for FEMA. And now the government is considering that even though they don't have a clear title, but they can show that they've been living in the house all their life, or, so that's an interesting bill that I hope that you all would support.
It's been an issue in New Orleans and in Texas as well.
Yes. And Angela?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to revisit something I said moments ago about affirmatively furthering fair housing. So again, this may be an issue that comes out of our state because state law controls transferring titles and wills, but it's the implications to me that are fair housing implications. For example, it limits choice, meaning if you would think you are the lawful owner of the home, but find out later that you don't actually have the title or the deed to the home because it was never transferred to you, and you really want to stay in that home, on that block, in that community, and if you lose it because you can't remedy the situation, to me, that's an argument for limiting choice. In terms of opportunity, clearly the opportunity that you framed earlier is generational wealth. So you're almost eliminated from being able to benefit from that generational wealth. Another implication, if you are not able to prove that you are the owner of that home and you are at risk of losing water, and then you lose water. I was so shocked maybe 5 or so years ago to find out that it's a huge problem here in Philadelphia. People who are in the Tangled title condition, who cannot go and negotiate with water revenue, access to water, do not have running water in their homes. And the idea of not being able to flush a toilet, to turn on a faucet, to be able to cook, because you're able to access water inside of your home just takes me back to something out of decades ago where maybe, you had to go and pump something from the well or whatever, but it's not the well you're pumping, you're going to the supermarket or wherever else to get water. And what a risk that puts people in terms of their health if they can't flush a toilet. Another issue is right out of the language of the affirmatively furthering for housing interim final rule, it talks about racial and socioeconomic information. So we're talking about that right now. We've already identified at least Blacks and Latinos, and more than likely, this is not an issue of people who have access to means, but it's folks who are in the opposite predicament. Congresswoman Scanlon, you had talked about, solutions. So I think that as a recommendation, some of the solutions we need to explore would be more education and outreach in this area, and reaching people where they are, so making sure that it's the culturally appropriate places where people get their information and sources that they believe in. Enforcement. Because I'm telling you, I truly believe that even though it begins with the state, there's implications that from this state law that are fair housing problems. Public services, back to the water issue. Enforcement, if we do identify that the implications that are happening from the state is having adverse effect on people's lives. And then in terms of getting more attorneys to get involved, you're right, the attorneys are competitive. So let's figure out a way to incentivize, their volunteerism so that they become more actively involved in trying to help folks in place of the money until more money becomes available to pay part-time or full-time attorneys to really channel their energy in this area so that we can resolve issues like people who are excluded from FEMA assistance because they can't prove things.
And see, one of the things that we do, or we're doing here in the Register of Wills, is we're trying our best to educate people about just the importance of having a conversation around making wills, because this is where the problem stemmed from, originated. People just aren't educated enough about making wills. They think that wealth automatically transfer, and it doesn't. It's a process. It's called probate.
Well, it's also, people hate thinking about their own death. I mean, they just avoid the topic. So trying to make it that, no, this is just part of living. You should plan ahead, and this is part of planning ahead.
And that's what we're trying to do here at the Register of Wills, is make sure that it becomes a conversation. We're looking for resources so we can, this night with the social media, but everybody don't, tune into social media. We need to get directly to these people. We need to knock on the doors and let them know, hey, you know, we can help you. And someone just asked, do it have to be an attorney to help you? Not necessarily, you know, just call our office at 215-686-6250, or you can go online and send any questions that you have at rowonline@phila.gov, and we can help you, and we can also refer you through our probate deferment initiative program to attorneys in the legal community that will interview you and help you and assist you if you qualify for their programs. If you don't qualify for their programs, then we always recommend that you consult with an attorney, because it's a legal process. It's easy when you had a will. So the will, once you had a will, and we always recommend best practice is to get the self-proven affidavit, which means you're going to have two witnesses there. They're going to sign in front of your attorney, and that's the best practice with the notary. So when you do come to our office with the will after the death, because in the state of Pennsylvania, you don't register the will. The will comes after you die. So we always tell people to put it up in a safe place and let someone know where it is, because I get a lot of calls and we get a lot of inquiries, and people say, I know my mother or father had a will. However, I can't find it. A will that you can't find means you don't have a will. A will that somebody verbally says that they're leaving you a house or asset, that's not a will. You're going to leave it in intestate, then you still have to come down to us. And then I will decide on who would be the administrator, who's the best person to be the administrator, and we would decide who are the heirs. And that's a little bit more cumbersome, whereas I want to be able to make sure that we can somehow pass legislation where it's a requirement, at least even when you sell a house or buy a house, people should get information about a will. The city council just passed a bill where the funeral directors now are going to be required to give people information about our office, so they can come to our office and ask the question, because we just help a family untangle a title, and the will was always there. They just didn't know to bring it down to the register of wills. I wanted to ask you, Congresswoman, last question. What do you do when people bring the cases to you? Because, you know, most people don't know state, federal, local, state, and federal. They just know elected official. So when they call you, you know, I'm going to call a Congresswoman because she says she can help us with, you know, help us. And so what's some things you do? Because I know you're an attorney, but do you have a process in your office to address?
Sure. Well, as a member of Congress, I'm not allowed to represent people directly, but so
Right.
what we do is we steer people to where they can get help, whether it's checking in with your office. I just posted in the chat, there's a great flyer from the Senior Law Center that talks about how to find out what is the information about the deed to your home, and what are some flags, you know, red flags if you don't have a deed, and how can you get a deed. So that's kind of a starting point. And then I usually refer them to the Senior Law Center, which is a great place to get help in getting a will or figuring out other property issues, or Philadelphia Legal Assistance or Community Legal Assistance, or if they're in the counties, it would be Legal Aid of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Because all of these things we're talking about, there is a system that on its face doesn't discriminate, but it's the access to justice piece of it that is, you know, the discrimination. People don't have access to legal help, so they don't know what their rights are. They don't know how to proceed. And it impacts housing, it impacts the criminal justice system, it impacts so many things, you know, just getting access to Social Security benefits, that kind of thing. So we try to make sure that we can steer people to the office that's going to be able to help them.
And there's also a lot of trust, and people are embarrassed to talk about their business. And so they'll say, well, I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
To the tune of 10,000, and we know it's more.
Yeah.
We know it's more. We're thankful that the Pew identified those 10,000, but we know there's more. And when you look at that map, it's just, you know, right there that map coincides directly with the crime map that Controller Rebecca Reinhardt put out. Where these Tangled titles are, this is where all the gun violence is occurring. So
And where all the hunger is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's the same
And
neighborhood.
where the redlining went on. And so this is a humanitarian, this is inhumane for people to have. This is really their legacies, their generational wealth that they're losing every day because simply a technicality that they didn't understand. That's the map right there. And the map on your left in red, those are the areas where we have the highest gun violence. If you look at the one on your right, it's almost identical to the Tangled titles. And the darker the area of the Tangled titles, the more. University of Penn just recently put out a study that said if one house on one city block receives basic system repair grants, that crime decreases within 22%. So this is a safety issue. This is a safety issue, not just for the people that are in Tangled titles, but the people that live next door to people that live in Tangled titles. And so I'm thankful that you came on this show, and we hope to invite you again. I don't want to let you miss your train. If you want to leave with any closing information, and Angela, you can follow up with any closing information. We really appreciate this this time with you, Congresswoman.
Sure. Well, thank you for convening everyone, because it is what we need to do to get the information out, to help people understand that there are things they can do. And you talked about, folks maybe being embarrassed or not wanting to deal with it. The other thing that I've seen is that when they find out, the money that has to be paid, in fees and stuff, that can prevent them from doing it. But there are resources to help, and there is the Tangled Title Fund, and we're trying to get more resources to do that. So we want to make sure that they know there's help to get them through, the process, and then that may give them access to more money, whether it's for LIHEAP or for repairs or that kind of thing. So it's a good thing to get ahead of this. And if people live in the 5th Congressional District, which is southwest Philadelphia and then out into Delaware County, they can contact our office through scanlon.house.gov if they're online, or they can call the office by calling 610-626-2020. So please, we encourage them to reach out. And we're also working with the state reps in our area to make sure that they know how much help legal services can provide, so that we're all working together. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. And Angela, any closing comments before we finish this episode of Plan, Prepare, Protect? And it's plan your estate, prepare your heirs to protect your generational wealth. Plan, prepare, protect.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's a mantra that, we should all adopt, from the youngest to the oldest, and act upon. And again, thank you and your office so much for inviting me to this forum and giving me an opportunity to use the Fair Housing Rights Center's platform to work along with yours. Everything is interrelated and everything is interconnected. You were able to show that so seamlessly with the maps that you just had up. Again, my story is, I believe that there are fair housing implications to this. I'm not going to stop talking about it. I'm not going to stop trying to get other people to see that. And I encourage your listening audience to also think about it in that regard, so that we can insist that interagencies or state offices and local offices work more closely together to address these issues. These are barriers to wealth for us. So if we insist that people not get into their silos, put their head down, and not communicate with each other, these problems will persist. I take it to the extent of saying, how about we even encourage our school system, where children have been undereducated for a very long time, also be introduced to these concepts, so that they become the next generation of knowing what they should not do. Because I recognize that many people are in this predicament because it was in their heart's desire to just get property that would stay in their families for in perpetuity, not realizing that state law did not coincide with what was in their heart. So we need to reverse and change action in order to make these outcomes. And if anybody is facing a housing discrimination problem because of your race, color, religion, gender, and national origin. You have families with children or you disability and sales, rental, lending, insurance, appraisal, contact the Fair Housing Rights Center at 215-625-0700. Thank you.
And repeat your number again, please.
215-625-0700. That's the Fair Housing Rights Center in Southeastern Pennsylvania.
And if you want to contact us at the Philadelphia Register of Wills, we are in room 180, the first floor of City Hall. We are open by appointment only. We never closed down during the pandemic. My team continued to work, continued to probate properties, continued to marry people. If you want to contact us at 215-686-6250. Again, if you have a question for us, row online at phila.gov. We answer this question on a daily basis. Also, we have these Plan, Prepare, Protect webinars every Thursday from 6 to 7. Please visit us on our social media pages. As you know, we're on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn, we are on TikTok, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter. We are trying to get this information out. Please consult an attorney just to talk to them about, your last will and testament. If you qualify for our probate deferment initiative, we will assist you. We will defer fees, meaning you do not have to pay those fees. We will not incur any interest unless you want to sell the property, then we'll come after our fees. Commissioner Jim Leonard at the Recorder of Deeds, he is waiving certain fees, and wanted to let you all know this, we are two different offices. The Register of Wills is one office, that's an elected office. We run every 4 years. And the Recorder of Deeds, that's an appointed position, and that's two separate offices. But we've come together to assist, defer, and waive fees, and then we help you get to some attorneys so they can help you understand this process, the probate process. And then after we assist you into getting the title of the property in your name, then we help you make the will, because that's one of the conditions. So I'd like to thank you all for coming on tonight. I hope you all, if you have any information that you want to share or any ideas about how we can get information out to your community, we come to your community, we come to your schools, we'll come to your churches. We just want to make it popular to talk about making a will so you can protect your generational wealth. I want to thank you all for joining us for this Plan, Prepare, Protect. We have one more and then we will end this season and we'll come back in a few weeks. Thank you all and have a nice day.